And welcome. We're here with another in-depth interview. It's been a while. I'm Jerry Miller, and with us today, one more time, Idaho State University Athletic Director Pauline Thiros. And Pauline, it is incredibly good to see you.
It's good to see you, even from afar, too, Jerry.
Well, that's the way we're doing a lot these days, but we're here to get the latest information we can get from you about what's going on with Idaho State athletics, with what's going on in the Big Sky Conference and the rest of the year, because I believe one of the last times I saw you was in Boise, the day the Big Sky Conference basketball tournament was canceled, not postponed, but canceled in March, when both the men and the women's teams were there, and the men's team met upstairs in their team meeting room at the hotel, and you got up and addressed the entire team at that time to talk about the cancellation and what went into that decision. Well, so many things have happened since then, and it's been crazy. People don't know what to believe because they hear conflicting reports almost every day and sometimes multiple times a day. Rumors run rampant. So, as an athletic director, as part of the Big Sky Conference, specifically, what has life been like for you the last 5 months?
Well, certainly, I remember that day well, and I didn't expect that it would be July and that we would be facing another spike of the magnitude that we're facing and having the kinds of decisions to make about fall sports that we're all having to make. I had certainly been hopeful that the actions that we took last spring, that the NCAA took, would really be enough to get us started with college sports again in the fall. And I hope it, and I still am hopeful about that. But it has been insane. You know, the Big Sky athletic directors have been meeting at least twice a week. I serve on the Olympic Sports Committee, which has spent hours and hours and hours working on abbreviated and alternative schedules for all of the Olympic sports to go forward, not only to ensure safety, but to reduce the budget impact that those seasons will have, so to help us absorb the many, many revenue impacts that we're all facing. So we've been rebuilding budgets, we've been rebuilding schedules, we have been building and rebuilding testing and playing and training protocols all throughout these months. And it's been fluid, it's been really rigorous. But what I can tell you, I don't know about other athletic directors, but I have been so grateful for the talented staff that we have and for the hours that they are putting in. Our athletic training staff, Jerry, and our strength and conditioning staff and our coaches, it's really been a heavy lift to get things ready to welcome student athletes back for voluntary workouts and to do the planning that's required for the fall, and then executing all of these small group workouts. There's not enough hours in a day, but somehow our staff is finding them. So it's been rigorous, but boy, am I grateful for our Bengals.
Can you go into detail about some of the things that have happened in the process to bring those athletes back to campus for those workouts?
Well, sure. You know, initially in the early months, while everyone was on quarantine, we were really focused on trying to take care of their mental health at home and trying to supply them with the academic support that they would need for the transition to online and just provide some kind of semblance of community. So most of our teams were having a couple of Zoom meetings a week, coaches, staff getting together with student athletes to have one-on-one or small group conversations just about how to stay healthy and sane and productive during quarantine. And then we really had to turn our attention to getting the weight room ready. We ordered and funded through the Champions Fund, by the way, which so many people probably watching now helped fund, an online training system that allows us to deliver specific workouts by athlete and by team to them at home that they could do virtually, and then that they could keep track of in the weight room as well without exchanging a lot of paper and having a lot of contact. And that's been very meaningful. obviously deep cleanings of all the facilities with the help of our Holt Arena crew and our university facilities group, the ordering of personal protective equipment for across the department, across student athletes, the setting up of daily screenings. Every single day, every student athlete is screened for symptoms and temperature and how they've been feeling and who they've had contact with and where they've been in the last 7 days, so that if the need arises, we have good contact tracing. And just working with our medical group to decide what's the proper protocol for a small group voluntary practice or for a lift, and how small do we need to keep the groups, when do we need to wear masks. We've had to answer and codify all of those questions, educate student athletes and staff about them, and then execute them daily and be ready for them to change on a moment's notice.
How small are these workout groups that you're referring to?
We're working out right now in groups of 15. We have 15 platforms in the weight room, so only one student athlete on a platform at a time. And then, of course, there is one strength coach present in each of those. But keeping it to a group of 15, they've got to arrive to their workout 15 minutes early to get the temperature screen and to receive the very redundant, I'm sure for them, educational session about how to prevent, how to follow our protocols, what to do if you're not feeling well, and all of those types of things. So we're working like a well-oiled machine right now.
What sports are represented by the athletes on campus right now?
Well, right now it's primarily the summer access sports. So there's football, men's and women's basketball, but we haven't closed the gym to voluntary work for student athletes in other sports because, of course, as we know, we pride ourselves on having a lot of local and regional student athletes from Idaho, and they need to be able to train as well. So we do have some track, volleyball, soccer, mixed in golf, tennis with those other 3 programs, but primarily the NCAA allowed summer access sports make up the bulk of the student athletes who are here.
Originally, weeks and weeks ago, a report was released, I believe, saying that there were somewhere around 117, 119 athletes, athletic department staff members that were tested. And there was one positive test for coronavirus. Has that changed since?
Yes, so the initial report was that we tested the 117 as baseline as people arrived and began their training, and we didn't have any positive tests in that first group. Going forward from there, student athletes quarantine at home. If they're from outside of Pocatello, they arrive, they wait 2 days, they're tested, and then they self-isolate until we get a negative test. So we've probably done, I'm guessing here, it's not exact, but probably by now close to 200 tests. We test when they arrive, and we test if there are symptoms or that there's exposure to a known case. So of all of the tests we've done, we've actually, I think, had 7 positives, and they've all been on isolation. We end their training group for a time whenever that happens and follow all the protocols. So I think we're doing very well. It's become a matter of the new normal, that every day we do tests, every day we get results, and every day we take the steps that follow.
With the positive tests that you've had, is there a way to gauge how they were exposed? Have any of those positive tests been athlete-to-athlete exposure?
Well, it's hard to say. The health department assists with all of the contact tracing, so it's hard to tell where they come by it, especially when they're coming in from outside the community. Certainly, once a case arrives, the most susceptible to it are those in the same training group or roommates and things like that. So all of it can be related back to contact with a known case of some kind.
Let's get right to the question so many ISU fans want an answer for. Will there be fall sports at ISU?
I sure hope so. We're doing everything that we can to make that happen as a conference. The decision hasn't been made, though, yet. It is up in the air. As you probably all experience, if you're watching the news and watching to see what happens with NCAA sports, every day there's an announcement from a different conference that they are either canceling fall sports, delaying the start of fall sports, or moving fall sports to the spring. All of those options are on the table, but thus far I can tell you that the Big Sky is working very, very hard to move fall sports ahead. We are planning and have been working with the Big Sky Medical Committee to put in the measures that would be needed to have competition. We have a Holt Arena plan that's ready to have limited capacity, but to have fans in Holt Arena if we're able to do that. We've sold an awful lot of season tickets so that I know if we have games, we will have people who are wanting to get in the door. And so I think that it's a possibility, a strong possibility that we will have games. What I can tell you is that unlike many of our partners, Idaho State has not lost any of its money games yet. Our Fresno State game and our University of New Mexico game are still out there. And we communicate with those athletic departments and athletic directors to monitor the situation on a weekly basis. I think it's unlikely that there will be very many teams at all playing on week 0, and we're making some efforts to try to move that game later to one of our bye weekends. And other rearranging of games is happening during the season to get the safer games, the more open states to play first. And the less open states to possibly play later. But right now, we are going forward with the assumption that at some level we will have football this fall. I do think that the Big Sky will consider the other options as this illness remains pervasive and escalates in many places, including in Idaho. There will be some hard decisions to be made about what's best for our student athletes. And in the end, everyone talks about these decisions being financial in nature or driven by money. These decisions are going to be driven by what's best and healthiest for the student athletes in the end.
Is there a drop dead date for the conference to make a decision about what will happen with football and other fall sports?
Sure. In my opinion, the drop dead date is yesterday. I want to know which of these plans that we're going to be executing here. We could report for training on July 24th. And right now we're holding that off yet another week. The end of the month is absolutely, I think, the very latest we could have a decision, but I tend to expect that there would be one sooner.
The term conferences canceling fall seasons, and let's just talk about football and say the Big Sky decides to cancel the season. Does that mean that all schools in the conference are prohibited from playing any games, or do schools have some autonomy to schedule and play some games that may not be conference games?
That would all be a part of the conference decision. I mean, when some decision is made, all of those things will have been considered and formally expressed as to what's allowable. So I think that many schools are going away from non-conference games and allowing conference. I think it would be highly irregular for a conference to cancel all conference games and allow non-conference. So I don't expect that would happen. But certainly by a vote of institutions, the conference can execute any number of different arrangements to make this season go or not.
The state of California announced that schools in that state education system would not be allowed to use state funding to travel to the state of Idaho to play any games because of Idaho's new law transgender athletes. What's the status, the situation with ISU scheduling and the possibility of that happening with teams from California that are in the Big Sky Conference?
Sure. Well, our Big Sky partners, affiliate members, and our full member Sac State intend to play those games. If the conference has conference football, those Cal schools will travel to Holt Arena and play the games that they're obligated to play. And that is possible because Cal schools there are other states on that list that they're prohibited from funding travel to those states with state funds. And they've been able to find mechanisms with funding that comes from either private donors or other revenue sources to make those trips happen, because they are members of our conference and the games need to happen. So those games at this time are scheduled to be played. And if they're not played, it would be more COVID related than it would be related to that legislation. Keep in mind, that's this year. Going forward, those games could be harder to get. Before we obligate teams, there could be more discussion, because private funds and all funds are a lot harder to come by now than they were 1 year ago. And so I certainly think that it could impact future seasons.
Could that have an impact on future configuration of the Big Sky?
That's hard to say. If you look at how travel to other states, and if you just look historically at what has happened to other states with similar legislation, I don't think that has been the reason that the nature or the membership of other conferences have changed. So I guess I wouldn't expect that, but 2020 is showing us to expect the unexpected.
So as of right now, the home game, the first conference game against Sacramento State, scheduled for Holt Arena, and a couple of weeks later against UC Davis, both Big Sky members, both games scheduled are still on tap to be played as scheduled.
Yes, they are. As of this moment, yes, they are.
Okay. Earlier in our conversation, you talked about budget difficulties. Talk about what this entire situation has done to budgets, not just in the Big Sky, but specifically for Idaho State University, and how you're trying to patch the holes in the diet.
Sure. Well, I guess on one hand, I'm very grateful that we had managed to dig ourselves out of a huge, deficit budget habit. And we had presented a balanced budget pre-COVID that we were very, very happy with. That depended on revenue from a number of sources. So a portion of our revenue comes from state appropriations, and that's primarily salaries and things of that nature. And the rest comes from revenue from student fees that they have generously voted to allocate to athletics, and game revenue, guarantee revenue, a lot of revenue from the NCAA, which is generated primarily through the men's basketball tournament. And we all know that didn't happen last year. So our distribution was dramatically reduced due to that. So going forward, we can expect that should we play football in Holt Arena, we know there aren't going to be 10,000 people at a game. And, 40 or 45% capacity in Holt means 40 or 45% of the revenue. And we're uncertain what will happen with the guarantee games. We're grateful they're going forward right now, and we hope that continues to be the case. But should other sports go to non-conference, eliminating non-conference opponents, there are guarantee games for men's and women's basketball, and for all of our sports have guarantee games at some level. So it makes our budget very uncertain. So we're planning it very conservatively. I thought the Big Sky did a very good job in the Olympic Sports Committee of adjusting conference schedules to make sure that play can happen in the most efficient and economical way possible, combining travel partners in some cases. For example, volleyball, and this is a difficult thing for volleyball, but we don't intend for it to last forever. Those teams will be traveling to one venue and playing 2 matches back-to-back, Friday and Saturday, and both will be home matches for one team. It won't be a home and away, and it dramatically reduces costs. So you'll see changes like that in all of our conference sports. Right now, we're fortunate that a very good fundraising year last year, both in terms of Bengal athletic boosters, private gifts that people made for different areas that they're passionate about, as well as the Champions Club and all of the individual sports clubs. We are able to invest in our student athletes in things like summer school to keep them moving towards graduation, in their scholarships, and in other things that are needed to make the department go, whether we play or not, because of the generosity of our Bengal boosters and our major donors and our alumni. So we're fortunate. We're in a decent position, but support right now is more important than ever as we look at what enrollment will do and what revenues are going to look like at the end of this very unpredictable year.
I know some may wonder, there are no fall sports. What happens to those dollars that have been raised by donation? But in reality, the Bengal Athletic Booster Drive here is pretty much for scholarships, and that pays for the education. And the students will still be attending classes, whether in person or online.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So scholarships are actually the single biggest investment that we make. And in addition to an awful lot of private gifts that fund scholarships, it's also the large part of our operating budget. So while things like travel would be reduced, things like salaries would remain relatively constant. We've already achieved as many savings as we can through furloughs and things of that nature. Haven't filled any open positions and have actually had to sacrifice some positions. If it came to it, that could happen again in the future, but we certainly have done everything that we can to guard against it. But scholarships still represent an enormous part of our operating budget, as do their wellness and their continued training. We certainly would not be doing the best for the health and well-being of our student athletes if for some reason we didn't have a fall season, if we didn't still train them, if we didn't still allow them to keep their craft where it needs to be to come back and compete in the spring or the fall. So all of that requires some resources. And given the revenue that we might forego if that happens, our budget certainly won't include anything extravagant.
Can you talk about some of the positions that you have not filled or even had to furlough?
Well, everyone, I think that it's been a very good practice. Everyone at the university who is in a non-classified position is experiencing a furlough, and it's a graduated furlough so that the most highly compensated employees take the most furlough days. And as you go down the scale as a relief measure, there will be people who take quite a few less furlough days. So that gives the university an important cushion to be able to provide for some of these unexpected expenses. In athletics, we primarily sacrificed positions that currently were not filled and went ahead and redistributed that workflow so that we would not have that expensive a position. And so a lot of people are working a lot of extra hours and carrying a lot of heavy load, but it is really important just to keep the department in a sound financial position. We have a senior associate athletic director position that we have not filled and won't fill until we're certain it's right to do that. We have our fiscal officer. We're very grateful that we have a person who's doing double duty from other areas in the university to help us. That is a heavy lift right now. And we've had some support positions in various areas that we have not filled because of the uncertainty. So we're in a position now where we haven't actually had to lay anyone off at this point.
Pauline, when you were offered this job, had you had a crystal ball to see ahead 5 years, would you have still taken it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My favorite thing over these months has been the many, many conversations I've been able to have with student athletes. Sometimes it's a one-on-one Zoom. We've had a couple of town hall meetings where as many of them as feel free, call in and we chat about things. And it really drives home the reason why we're here is these students. And they're still getting an excellent education. They're still focused on their goals. And they're doing what athletes and student athletes do best. They are, facing adversity and they're figuring it out and they're making sacrifices so that in the end we can get where we want to go. And they're learning a lot about, sacrificing something for the greater good. We all know that this population of 18 to 23-year-olds, while they're susceptible, while they get the illness, it doesn't create the same level of health issues that it does for other populations. But they're recognizing the need to make these sacrifices so that, we, in essence, save lives across the country and in our regional community. And we just help flatten this curve and see if we can't get all past this. But, sometimes the absence of something you love so much, like the opportunity to play your sport, really drives home how precious that opportunity is. And in the end, when we get all through this, the thing I keep promising our student athletes at the end of these calls is, hey, we are going to get there. You are going to see a day when you are in a huddle with your team again. You are going to see a day when you are on the field in Holt Arena or on the court in Reed Gym or, in fact, running at Davis Field, all ready to go, brand new for you. We are going to get there. We're going to be better for it. So I wouldn't trade my time working with our leadership team and with our student athletes at Idaho State for anything, pandemic or not.
Some across the country have suggested that all sports should have the plug pulled until coronavirus is gone. Your take on that view?
Well, if I've learned anything in this last 6 months, it's that we can't make hasty decisions. This changes so quickly. Back in June, we were all talking about coming back and opening up, and I don't think predicted the level at which we're now reconsidering that. So I think the opportunities are too important to say we need to pull the plug right now. We need to make sure we know that for just for the mental health and the continued advancement of all of our students, we need to provide the opportunities that we can provide. So it's been very important to work closely with our health professionals, with our state and local governments, with the NCAA, to monitor the situation, to make these decisions at the appropriate times, which is as late as we can with the most information we can, to decide if that's right. I think that this is, if you could see the faces of the student athletes in the spring when we delivered the news to them that they wouldn't have a season, you would not want to make that decision hastily. So you juxtapose that with the big responsibility that weighs on us of, are we doing the right thing for public health? And those are just two very heavy things to weigh. So I'm not ready to say, man, we ought to pull the plug. But certainly in the end, if that's what is deemed necessary to keep people safe, it certainly could happen.
Well, you've indicated that the end of this month, July, pretty much is about as long as the conference can wait to make a final decision. That's all the questions I have for you. I'm going to give you the opportunity, Pauline, now to just talk to our fans who are watching this interview and give them your final thoughts and your encouragement.
Well, I'll say the same thing that I've said to the student athletes. The Bengals are going to be back, and they're going to be back better than ever. I've been so impressed with our young people and the focus that they're having and just the grit that they're showing in working through this. We had a fantastic academic semester. Student athletes adjusted to online learning well, and they took their charge of doing well in the classroom very seriously, and they have delivered on really what they're here to do, and that is to get a degree and to make us all proud as students. So we're going to be back. We're going to be eligible. We're going to be high character, high performing Bengals again soon. And the other message that I would give to our constituents is, my goodness, thank you. You know, my phone is ringing off the hook with people who want to know how they can help. And so far, so many people with the Bengal Athletic Boosters, I've had many, many more calls to say, hey, if we don't have a season, can I redirect my gift or my season ticket revenue to something that the students really are going to need this fall? Far more calls of that nature than how do I get my refund, both of which are on the table. You know, we're certainly going to do the right thing by all of our Bengal fans, but my goodness, thank you for just the desire to band together and help everybody through this. And Idaho State University is going to come through just fine. Bengal Athletics is going to come through fine. And a large part of that is the support of this really outstanding community and our alumni base. I hope that everybody local will take the opportunity to walk the path along Red Hill and see the progress at Davis Field. You know, for me, that represents something that was so hard to get going. It was so hard to bring about. And it's something that over time, we really stuck to it and stuck with it because it was the right thing to do. And right now, to me, it's just such a symbol of progress and something moving forward that's great, that's going to make us stronger down the road. It's hard to feel discouraged when you walk that path and look at Davis Field. So I'd encourage anybody who's able to do that. We're looking forward to that being dedicated and opening, and we're looking forward to the return of fall sports as well. Sooner or later, we're going to be back. So that's where I'm hanging my hat.
Pauline Thiros, Athletic Director of Idaho State University, thank you for your leadership and thank you for your time today. It's indeed been a delight to talk to you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So thank you, Bengals. Go out there and roar.
Stay safe.